responsible for providing the power to escape that mighty gravitational pull of Earth that we've got here and take Starship into orbit.
9.
The booster itself stands
7,
about 70 meters tall
6,
and
5,
is roughly the same height as
3,
the fully integrated Falcon 9, which is just so great to see.
Ignition.
But
Lift
this
off.
Super Heavy booster has a diameter roughly 2.5 times that of Falcon 9, and with 33 much larger engines. We have a beautiful picture. This is one of my favorite things we're going to get today. Those are our 33 rapid engines at the base of the Super Heavy.
And you can see that they're in a right here. We've got a route array of 20 static engines. They're going to be providing a huge amount of thrust to lift off the entire stack. But then we've got the in the middle. They're going to be providing maneuvers and also helping to reorient come back there in flight.
Yeah, and when we say gimbal, it's basically tilting or almost wiggling the engines a few degrees in either direction to allow the booster to steer itself, just as you said, Shiva.
And we'll get some great shots later of
Hello.
actually a wiggle test that we perform ahead of liftoff, just to make sure that all those engines
There
are
we go.
able to control their full range of control authority.
Good
One thing to
afternoon.
note,
We are
those
here
Raptor engines are
for
completely
the
designed and
SpaceX launch of
manufactured
their Starship.
in-house.
Are they going to
They
do it this
are,
week?
as many of you know that have been following along, they are a reusable methane oxygen
So we're
staged
currently
combustion
listening
type engine.
to
So
SpaceX Direct.
it's a lot of words there.
Understanding about the ship.
And ultimately,
So
that
we've just been
staged
listening in, Jake,
combustion
expecting this thing
means
to
that
blow up.
we combust
Fully
the
blow up.
propellant in stages.
So
We
they've said
kind
that
of
it gets off
pre-combust
the
them in a
the launch
pre-burner,
pad.
and by doing so, it allows the
and
engine to be more efficient,
up into
i.e.,
the air a
more
little bit.
powerful.
Yeah.
They're happy with that.
Now, like Falcon 9, the Super
Anyway,
Heavy
leave
has
it.
4
Watch
grid
it.
fins
Have
to
a
assist with orienting itself in its return back to Earth. We got a shot of them there beneath the Starship's aft flaps. Now, as we talked about earlier, Super Heavy is not going to be attempting a land landing today. But with this flight test, we're still trying to get as much data as we can. We're focusing on the fundamental systems and operations, so that's the liftoff portion. But we are going to try to get some data on how the fins work and for that water landing that Super Heavy is going to be making after ascent.
I love that great view of the fins there. Now, Starship, or the spacecraft, is the second stage, and it makes up the top portion of the vehicle. It's designed for carrying passengers and cargo to Earth orbit and beyond. It stands about 50 meters tall, which is a little taller than the Statue of Liberty. It's comprised of 6 Raptor engines, 3 sea level and 3 vacuum engines, which are optimized to operate in the vacuum of space. And they provide a maximum of 258,000 tons of thrust in vacuum. Spacecraft is also outfitted with 4 flaps to help aerodynamically control the vehicle's attitude, which you can see those 2 forward flaps there on your screen now. So they help control the vehicle's attitude during atmospheric flight and enable precise landing at the intended location. Now, one thing we got to mention, the heat shields. They are iconic. Starship is wrapped in a heat shield, which is composed of 18,000 hexagonal ceramic tiles designed to insulate the vehicle during that atmospheric entry. And that's really important because the temperatures can be as high as 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. The hex-shaped tiles, like the ones that Shiva and I have, roughly make up about 2/3 of the vehicle. We can see that we have some different shapes. Mine is slightly curved. As you can imagine, it sits on the curved portions of the Starship vehicle.
Now, the one that I've got is a hexagonal tile that's more flat, and it's really used for the flatter structures on the vehicle. And we need a heat shield because when you're coming back in from re-entry, we're going supersonic, we're compressing all the air ahead of us. That ends up causing a lot of heating along the surface, and without a heat shield, that would go straight into the structure.
Yeah, one thing that's amazing to me, especially when I first picked up one of these heat shield tiles, is that they're so light. They almost feel like they're made out of foam. They're that light, and they kind of sound like it too. And one thing that we do want to mention, in order to reject the maximum amount of heat during that entry, like Shiva was just saying, they're black, and that's because black helps reject that heat that is building up on the exterior of the heat shield.
Now, Starship is designed for vertical takeoff and landing as opposed to taking off and landing like an airplane. And that's because that's really important because we don't have runways on the moon or Mars. Fortunately, at those destinations, the gravity is not as high as it is here on Earth. On Mars, the gravity is just 1/3 of what it is here on Earth, and on the moon, it's just 1/6. So in both of those cases, Starship with just its engines can take off without needing the Super Heavy booster like we do need here on planet Earth.
Now, for today's test, Starship does not have its landing legs attached because, like we said before, it won't be returning anywhere. Starship is expected to make a very hard ocean landing, which, if we even make it that far and manage to get any views, it will certainly make for a very exciting end to today's test. At this point in time, we are 20 minutes or just over 20 minutes from liftoff. Let's check in with John Innsbrucker for a status update. Hey, John, how's it looking?
Thanks, Kate. I'm John Innsbrucker, Principal Integration Engineer here at SpaceX. We're currently loading propellant from the ground system into both the first and second stages. Now, both vehicles use the same two propellants. That commonality helps build the reliability. And the fuel today is liquid methane. And that's at a temperature of just over 100 kelvins. That's about minus 272 degrees below zero on the Fahrenheit scale. Now, liquid methane is a different fuel from Falcon 9. That booster uses RP1 kerosene. However, our oxidizer is liquid oxygen, and that's the same as Falcon 9. Because there is no oxygen in space to support combustion, we have to bring our own. Now, leading up to where we are right now, we had a go-no-go poll that was conducted just after T-minus 2 hours. And once the team gave their goes, we started loading propellants onto the booster at T-minus 1 hour and 39 minutes. At T-minus 1 hour and 22 minutes, we began propellant loading of the ship. The second stage you can see on your screen right there. Now, propellant loading of the Starship's second stage main tanks completed at about the T-minus 27-minute mark, at which time we then began loading the two header tanks in the nose of the second stage. Now, at T-minus 3 minutes, when the first stage Super Heavy propellant loading completes, that means we'll have all the propellant on the rocket, and the vehicle will be fully loaded with over 10 million pounds of propellant. Now, right now, at T-minus 19 minutes and counting from liftoff, the weather and winds are looking good. We have been watching the ground level winds. They're at 18 miles an hour. As the morning continues, they will increase, but that is below our limits right now. We're also looking at upper altitude winds. We're waiting for one more balloon, but we believe that we're going to be go. On the launch vehicle itself, the teams, the good news, they're not working any issues right now. But if for some reason we do not make our test flight today, if we have to hold, we have a backup launch window. However, we're not sure when it would be. It could be 24 or 48 hours after today. It'll depend on how far we get into the countdown. But right now, heading for a T0 at 8:28 Central, 13:28 Universal Time. Kate, everything is looking good.
Awesome news. Now, in order to make life multiplanetary, we need a fully reusable vehicle that's capable of carrying a huge amount of cargo and a lot of people to orbit and have a pretty quick turnaround. The idea is to effectively reuse launch vehicles just like airplanes.
Yeah, imagine if you had to wait for a new airplane to be constructed every time you wanted to fly. You'd rarely go anywhere, and for most of us, it would be completely unaffordable. In order for us to get to Mars and back with lots of people, lots of cargo, multiple times, reusability really is a must.
In advance of our first missions to Mars, Starship will execute a number of missions with both cargo and people, starting with Earth orbit and eventually expanding to the Moon and beyond.
Now, in the near term and a bit closer to home, Starship will also be critical to other programs. Once fully operational, it'll deliver the full-size and upgraded version of our Starlink satellites. And that's super exciting because our next generation satellites represent a step forward in Starlink's capabilities and will allow us to connect millions of more people around the world with high-speed internet to watch launch webcasts.
Such an exciting future ahead of us. But first, let's talk a little about how we got to where we are today.
Now, Starship's testing ramped up in July of 2019 with our Starhopper prototype, sort of a short version of the Starship that we see today. There's a great photo of it. It was just over 18 meters tall. It had a single Raptor engine, and we had it to test fly and perform low-level altitude maneuvers and attempt landing. The initial test flight, or hop, reached about 20 meters in altitude. That was followed by the one that you've got on your screen here. This was our 150-meter altitude hop. We went up, took a little jaunt away, about 100 meters or so away from the launch pad. use that Raptor engine to fly and actually land. And actually, this hopper is actually down at Starbase now.
Yeah, I love this shot. It's just so fun to see it fly. After a series of 150-meter hop tests with earlier prototypes, the Starship program saw a major breakthrough during a test flight of the vehicle known as serial number 8, or SN8. You can see it there on your screen now. In December 2020, SN8 demonstrated a first-of-its-kind controlled aerodynamic descent and landing. 2 words, belly flop. The SN8 prototype rose to an altitude of 12.5 kilometers or 7.8 miles and conducted a belly flop maneuver, which you see there, during its descent. While it didn't stick the landing, the test was a major milestone in the development of Starship. In fact, we should be able to see that unfortunately failed landing. Boom. It was fun to watch, though.
Rapid unscheduled disassembly, but learned a lot of data. Now, the testing continued on to prototype serial number 9. It took a 10-kilometer flight. That's about 6.2 miles up in February of 2021. We had a nominal ascent. We executed the engine cutoffs once we got to the top of the altitude window. We did that belly flop maneuver, which is so much more fun to say than controlled descent aerodynamic maneuver. That was all stable, but unfortunately, we had a dramatic end on this flight as well. We had a failure on one of the engines that resulted in another pretty large fireball. But what was really cool about both of those flights was how much we learned just between serial numbers 8 and 9, and how quickly we were able to achieve our primary objective in those 2 flights. In addition to that, we got so much data that demonstrated control of the vehicle in that subsonic regime.
Ultimately, we performed 9 Starship high-altitude test flights in total. And then, as you see on your screen there, in May of 2021, SN15 launched from Starbase, reached an altitude of about 10 kilometers, performed a number of maneuvers, and safely returned to the launch site. This was the first Starship prototype to fly, control its descent, safely land, and be recovered in one piece.
And people were cheering like crazy.
I was one of
them. Now, having achieved those successes in our suborbital campaign, one of the next big challenges is for the upper stage when it comes to reusability and surviving the hypersonic, really high heating phase of entry. Combined with the later ability to refill Starship's tank with propellants, the fuel and oxygen, while we're on orbit, that will enable us to have a fully reusable transportation system that's designed to carry both crew and cargo on long duration missions, interplanetary flights, and will help humanity get to the moon, travel to Mars, and beyond in our solar system.
This is all just basically our path
now, if you're just joining us,
progress,
I'll just turn I'll just mute
basically an iteration on each
we've been
vehicle,
watching this for past hours, but
is a core part
they're not expecting
of
this to
how we
work.
Here at
I'd just like to let you know.
We like to test early.
They've said
and
if it
often,
clears the tower and gets up
publicly as well in our case,
not even
and
to
that's both for
orbital.
hardware
Just,
and software.
as long as it clears the tower, the whole spaceship,
expected,
they're happy with that
so much
because
from
they'll
it, and
get
it
lots of
informs
data
our
from
next
it. But
yeah, we learn a
they're
lot
expecting
from
it to
actually
crash
putting the vehicle through
and blow up.
flight-like
That's what they're
tests.
expecting. Well, they actually are
Even
going to
the
crash it anyway because
there's
none of those
opportunity
landings
to
that are
learn more
happening
about the
today.
vehicle into today's launch attempt,
They're
and so
crashing
far things are looking really good. Now, we are continuing into our countdown. We're about T-minus 12 minutes to go. I think it's a perfect time for another check-in with John Insprecher. How's it going, John?
Well, Shiva, the good news is that the nets are quiet. The teams are currently working. No significant launch vehicle issues. You can see the T clock there on your screen, T-minus 12 minutes, 10 seconds, and counting. Propellant loading is continuing on both the Super Heavy and the ship stages. You can see the graphic on the left-hand side of the screen. Most recently, we began loading liquid oxygen and liquid methane fuel into the header tanks on Starship. Those are 2 small tanks just underneath the nose of the second stage. Now that started at T-minus 27 minutes. That'll be wrapping up at about that will be wrapping up about T-minus 9 minutes. Now the Starship second stage main fuel and LOX tanks are loaded for flight right now. The Super Heavy first stage booster propellant loading is continuing, and that'll go till about T-minus 3 minutes. We're underway with engine chill as we get ready for T0. We're also configuring the launch pad for liftoff.
We have to clear
The booster hold downs have been unlatched. They'll be ready to retract at liftoff. And the second stage quick disconnect is beginning its configuration for release. The methane and liquid oxygen propellants currently going to the second stage go through that quick disconnect. That's that arm that reaches out from the tower to the base of the second stage. The SpaceX team continues to check in with the Coast Guard. Good news is we've not heard any reports of boats in the safety perimeter as the launch vehicle heads out over the Gulf of Mexico. So right now, T-minus 10 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. Everything continues to go well for an on-time launch.
Now, today's test flight is taking place out of our Starbase facility in South Texas, and that test site has gone through a huge amount of development over the last couple of years.
One thing I want to point out, this is a great view from our drone. Not only can we see the pad, but in the fog, kind of in the distance, in the background and to the left of the pad, you can actually see our production facility, which is the other part of Starbase in addition to the launch pad.
Of course, as part of rapidly iterating with our test program, we're also rapidly iterating on our production system to produce Starships and Super Heavies. Last year, the Starbase team produced 4 Starship Super Heavy boosters and 5 Starships, along with their 200th Raptor 2 engine. And they're only scaling up from there, Kate.
Yeah, it's incredible to think that for 2023, production has 5 boosters and 8 Starships going. So it's incredible. And it's important to have that system fill in basically the manufacturing line so that we have product ready to go as soon as we're done with this test.
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately, I mean, we talked about how Starship is an order of magnitude more payload to orbit. But if you're going to go set up a base on the moon or Mars, you're going to need thousands of metric tons of propellants. And so you're going to need a fleet of vehicles that's capable of doing that.
Yeah, one thing to note, Starbase directly employs more than 1,800 employees. It's the largest employer in the area, in fact. And we're very thankful to Cameron County for being so supportive. This is a view from the Cameron County Amphitheater. And there's a crowd there. And you could tell by the energy here in Hawthorne as well that everyone's getting really exciting. I feel my own heart rate going up and up.
I know. It must be really, really exciting to go see this. And I mean, just the sheer amount of power on Starship, you're going to feel it down there when this thing lifts off from the pad. We've actually got a great shot here of the natural surroundings around the pad. Oddly enough, most of the pads end up being around sort of wild locations like this. But coming up on T-minus 8 minutes, I think it's another good time for check-in with John.
Thank you, Shiva. T-minus just over 8 minutes to the first test flight of Starship. Currently, we are pressurizing second stage. We are also closing out liquid oxygen and fuel header loads on the second stage. We're also getting ready for propellant load tank pressurization on the first stage. In fact, we are just now closing out header tank load on the second stage. Now with the header tanks loaded and closed out, that means we're down to just the first stage to finish loading. That'll finish about T-minus 3 minutes. And at that point, when both stages are loaded, we will have the 10 million pounds of liquid propellant on board. Now in the next few minutes, the guidance system will begin its final alignment for flight during a quiet period when the rocket's not doing anything. The automated flight termination system will be armed and a final TVC checkout will be performed. Those are the engine wiggles, and hopefully we'll be able to see that with the cameras underneath the vehicle and maybe even the second stage engines. And there's a view looking underneath the Super Heavy first stage with the 33 Raptor engines. Now, a reminder as we continue counting down, if we do need to hold, the point where we hold the clock would be at T-minus 40 seconds. We can pause there. Typically in the past, if we need a little bit more time to finish final checkouts or do some pressurization of the onboard storage tanks, that's where we would hold. But currently, we're not hearing a need to hold. So at 6 minutes, 27 seconds, everything looks good.
So if you are joining us, hello.
As we get close we're going to get into the engine ignition sequence of 33 Raptors, and that's going to be something new for everybody.
I cannot wait for that moment. So for those of you that are familiar with how we launch Falcon 9 rockets, you probably know that we light all 9 of those first stage Merlin 1D engines all at once. It's pretty different than what we do or what we're attempting to do today. We're actually going to be igniting those 33 engines in banks or clusters, and that sequence starts at T-minus 6 seconds.
Yeah, and the ignition sequence is a little bit different, both in terms of the timing and also the ignition method. So on Falcon 9, we use a chemical called T-Tab. It's a pyrophoric material, so that means when you mix the two together, it produces a flame that kicks off that green characteristic spark on Falcon 9 missions. But actually on Starship, we use electrical ignition systems. Many of those are integrated on the ground system here. And the electrical ignition, we start lighting the banks at T-minus 6 seconds. And then over the next 4 seconds, the 3 sets of banks will ignite and eventually bring the booster up to a thrust to weight greater than 1 and hopefully ascent.
Super exciting. Like we said, pretty different from our Falcon 9 launches. And so this will be the first time that any of us have gotten to see this type of integrated test flight with both the Starship and the Super Heavy booster.
Everyone's cheering as we get into T-minus 5 minutes.
We want to remind everyone that success today is anything.
It looks fun down there. I'm going to go join them.
For today, success is anything that we learn that helps improve the future builds of Starship. If we lift off and clear the pad, we're calling that a win.
A great shot of the pad there. A great shot of the quick disconnect on the second stage. You can see the frost line on the booster where that methane is fully topped up. I think we're just coming up on the last few minutes here of propellant fill on the booster. And that quick disconnect is going to separate away as we actually get into the ignition sequence, but it's providing electrical connections now and also providing the propellants that we're loading into the vehicle.
Yeah. We're just now under 4 minutes until liftoff of the Starship flight test. We've been following along for what honestly seems like days and days now, but really it kind of comes down to years. It has been a long time to get to where we are today. Now, fast forwarding a little bit, we have the opportunity to hold, if necessary, at 40 seconds. And we are able to hold there for about 15 minutes or up to 15 minutes and still be able to lift off.
Yeah, and that's a little bit different from Falcon for the propellant sequence on Falcon that we don't have the opportunity to hold. So that's a cool new capability on Starship.
Yep. Right now, T-minus 3 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. We got some great views from the drone. It's nice that the fog is slowly lifting. We get some of the blue skies, hopefully good views. What we're waiting for right now is closeout of propellant loading on the first stage. That should be wrapping up here shortly. In fact, it looks like fuel fill and drain valves are coming closed. That means first stage is fully loaded, second stage fully loaded, and that 10 million pounds of propellant on board the Starship launch vehicle.
I want to take a quick moment to say that the crowd energy here is electric. I feel like it's Falcon Heavy test demo all over again.
And hopefully you'll hear us as we get into the plus count. But right now, next activity is coming up. The flight termination system arms at T-minus 2 minutes. Thrust vector control checkouts at T-minus 2 minutes. And then after that, major activity will be the T-minus 40-second gate. There's the view looking up at the 33 Raptor engines. There are 20 engines in a circle on the outside. And as Shiva said earlier, 13 engines on the center.
Just phenomenal.
Those are the ones that gimbal.
These are 2 minutes then. Yeah, but they can still hold at around 40 seconds. Oh, they're very excited there.
So excited for TBC wiggles.
Okay.
Love this view. These are the 33 Raptor engines at the base of
You've got a
Super Heavy
heat shield over
booster.
that camera.
I think we can see those wiggles now.
Oh, they're moving about. Wow.
We're currently inside 90 seconds. Next major activity, T minus 40 seconds. That is a gate, a decision point. We're waiting. Possibility the propulsion team may need a few minutes. Flight termination system is armed for flight. We're getting ready for T minus 1 minute and counting. No, T minus 1 minute and counting. Next, we'll see as we get past T minus 40 seconds for final checks of the vehicle.
Oh, it's gone past it. We're going for it. Let's just hope it goes. Oh, what's happened? Did that clock go backwards? Oh, a glitch in the matrix
you can
there.
see the clock is recycled.
Oh.
Flight director has called a hold. We are recycling. For the moment, we'll see where they move the clock back to. They could hold at T minus 40 seconds. They could go to an earlier
I've just
point.
got one job.
Give us a minute to listen into the nets, and we'll see if we can get you more information to share.
Just one job. It better not be a stuck valve again. Well, this is all very tense. Thanks for joining us. We have plenty of viewers across all platforms. It's all gone very quiet now. They're all looking. We'll see if I can get any information. Hang on a minute. Pretty picture, though. No, nothing on there at the moment. On hold for final launch check. Okay. Doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong. Well, it's all very, very quiet at SpaceX now. They're just trying to figure out what's going on. They've got nothing to say, got nothing scripted, obviously. But we'll keep talking. Have we got any comments? Oh, here we go. Good. Not sure who that is. Somebody on YouTube, though. Please drop us a comment. Say hello. Say where you're from. What's your name and where you're from?
John Innsbrucker again here at the Hawthorne webcast desk. We're holding a T minus 40 seconds. What we've heard so far is we have a couple of issues we're working. One is the booster tank pressurization. Final pressurization was just a little bit long. That's not unusual. We've held at T minus 40 seconds before to pressurize. That appears to have been resolved. At the same time on the second stage, they're working some final purging. We should know very shortly if that is cleared and if we'll continue the countdown.
Everyone, especially that person, is excited to keep going. Like John said, we should know shortly if we are able to continue. But as we mentioned before, we are able to hold up to 15 minutes and still be able to lift off today.
Yeah, on Falcon 9, it's a little bit different. Once we start propellant loading, we pretty much have to go at the targeted time. Otherwise, the propellants can warm up and we may not have the performance for that particular mission profile. It's a little bit different on Starship.
Folks, if I can interrupt.
Yeah.
It looks like they're clearing all the flags and we're going to release at T minus 40 seconds.
That is amazing news.
Amazing.
Team working quickly through their issues on first and second
Well,
stage.
I was watching, that's why.
And I'm sure all of the rehearsals and simulations that they've been doing have prepared them to evaluate this data quickly to try to get us in for today's launch attempt.
For those of you just joining, we have a brief hold at the T-minus 40-second mark. The team is resolving one issue with the bleed purge on the Stage 2 Raptors. Like John just said, the teams are quickly working that, and it looks like the flags are being cleared as we speak. So we should be able to resume the launch countdown any moment now.
And it's worth noting on Starship that once we resume the countdown, it restarts from the 40-second period, and then we keep going unless another condition pops up. So stick around because Starship could be going here real soon.
Don't walk away, that's for sure. Amazing views here coming to us from Starbase, Texas.
Cheering before the start again.
We're going. We're going. 30 seconds, people. Come on. I think it's going to go. I think it'll go. I think it's going to go up. Where it's going to go. This could blow up. We'll just fall over. Here we go.
8, 7, 6, 5, 3.
Don't go in. There it is. Oh, wow. Dude, that is phenomenal.
Booster upper chamber pressure is nominal.
T-plus 33 seconds into the test flight of the inaugural Starship vehicle.
No.
Tower cleared, we're into pitch over. Propulsion reports first stage engines nominal. What a sight from the ground cameras at Starbase. We're flying at twice the thrust of the Saturn V heading to space.
Additional signal, surface proceed.
We're throttled down and throttled back up. Going through the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure.
All them engines are working, are they?
As the velocity increases, the density of the atmosphere is decreasing.
Max Q.
Lessening stress on the vehicle. The call out, next Q now.
Yeah, actually, I just noticed the graphic on my.
Continuing to watch the first stage as we head down range.
Just remove me off the graphic a minute.
100 seconds into flight.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 engines are out.
Our next major activity is going to be shutdown of the first stage. Houston tracking station now acquiring the vehicle. With shutdown, we will get separation of Starship and Super Heavy and ignition of the Starship engines.
No, we're not going to see anything. We've got no cameras on.
We light up 6 engines in a staggered sequence. If all goes well, those 6 engines will burn for almost 6.5 minutes.
We've got cameras.
Onboard view from Starship. Here's views of the Raptor engines on the second stage as we prepare for stage separation.
Oh, wow.
After stage separation, the first stage will flip and begin a boost back maneuver for landing in the Gulf.
It seems not that. Are they going to go?
Continuing to fly, 2 minutes, 40 seconds. Let's get ready for main engine cutoff.
It seems to be. Does that seem to be rotating weirdly?
Beginning to flip for stage separation.
Oh, okay. Right. That picture inside there is amazing. It has to be right now. That seems to be rotating quite a lot. Oh. Gonna separate?
As of right now, we are awaiting stage separation, where Starship should separate from the Super Heavy booster.
Yeah, Kate, right now it looks like we saw the start of the flip, but obviously we're seeing from the ground cameras the entire Starship stack continuing to rotate. We should have had separation by now. Obviously, this is does not appear to be a nominal situation.
Yeah, it does appear to be spinning, but I do want to remind everyone that everything after clearing the tower was icing on the cake.
I do it.
And there, as you saw, as we promised, an exciting end to the Starship inaugural integrated test flight.
That liftoff was phenomenal, though. I do love it. I'll get the next one on the pad. Let's do it again.
Pumped to clear the pad and make it this far into the test flight, the first integrated flight of the booster and the Starship vehicle.
Live view there of our control center at Starbase, which we refer to as Star Command. As we said before, obviously we wanted to make it all the way through, but to get this far, honestly, is amazing.
We'll just leave you with the pictures there. We're just going to mute it this side, so I don't have to hear it. So that's it then. No, we don't know when the next. I think the next flight is going to be fairly soon. So join us again. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. It's just a little bit of fun, isn't it? Watching the future happen. And we'll be back for the next one as soon as they release a date. So keep an eye on the YouTube channel and the Facebook channels as well. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6,